Rapid military growth is a common theme in the history of Joint Base Lewis-McChord. Every major conflict, World War I, World War II, the Korean conflict, Vietnam, and the War on Terror, has triggered major growth in troop strength and infrastructure. Today, after more than a decade of sustained combat operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, Joint Base Lewis-McChord has grown into one of the Department of Defense's largest force projection bases. The infrastructure to match this rapid military growth is still underway and will take years of planning and development to get the base right-sized to match the military missions it now supports. Growth has had an effect both inside and outside the installation, with impacts on community issues such as transportation, schools, housing, and access to care and other services. JBLM traces its origins back to 1917 when Pierce County citizens bought, then donated, more than 62,000 acres to the federal government to become Camp Lewis, named after Captain Meriwether Lewis of the famed Lewis and Clark expedition. Initial construction began in May, and within 90 days, more than 2,000 buildings were built to house 60,000 soldiers. By September, the first recruits were moving into their temporary wood barracks. These soldiers would train at Camp Lewis, then deploy to Europe to serve with the Allied Expeditionary Forces during World War I. Permanent brick barracks were added in 1926. That year, the War Department also designated Camp Lewis as a permanent military post. In September 1927, the department renamed this post as Fort Lewis. In 1934, the post was halfway through a 10-year building plan, and it began to look like a self-sustaining city. In January 1938, the addition of an Army Air Force airfield was approved at an 1,800-acre site north of Fort Lewis. This facility was named McChord Field in July 1940. When the Air Force became a separate service in September 1947, it subsequently was renamed McChord Air Force Base. In 1939, as World War II intensified, Fort Lewis experienced more short-notice, rapid growth, growing from 7,000 soldiers in July 1940 to 26,000 soldiers 4 months later. At this time, Fort Lewis expanded with the construction of North Fort Lewis. Hundreds of buildings were built between October 1940 and April 1941, so the 41st Division could move into its new cantonment area on North Fort Lewis. The need for increased hospital facilities in the Northwest grew, and the War Department looked to Fort Lewis. In 1943, plans were announced to expand the Fort Lewis Hospital. Work began in July 1943 to build a semi-permanent emergency hospital, an all-brick, 1.5-mile-long, multi-corridored hospital. All medical sections around Fort Lewis were consolidated at what became Madigan General Hospital. Today, Madigan Army Medical Center serves more than 120,000 active duty service members, retirees, and their families. During the Korean War, Fort Lewis entered another major construction period when work began on 2 regimental areas east of Gray Airfield in January 1951. This growth included building large concrete and masonry barracks and headquarters buildings. This growth continued through the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s as Fort Lewis-based soldiers deployed overseas to Vietnam, the First Gulf War, and elsewhere. By the year 2000, various headquarters and barracks buildings, military family housing, and roads were built at Fort Lewis and McChord Air Force Base to support a base population of about 25,000 service members. That's where Fort Lewis and McChord Air Force Base stood until about 2005, when Army restructuring actions brought thousands of new troops to Fort Lewis, and the 2005 Base Realignment and Closure Commission directed that Fort Lewis and McChord Air Force Base merge into a single installation by the year 2010. This growth created a need for more construction to replace obsolete buildings and to build new facilities. Today, long-term construction requirements are identified and eventually will be completed in accordance with the JBLM Master Plan. Korean and Vietnam-era veterans who visit JBLM today say it looks nothing like I remember it.
Decades from now, I'll say the same thing.
Just like the cities around JBLM that have comprehensive growth plans guiding their future development, JBLM has a master plan that guides its future-based development. It's used by planners, designers, and contractors when doing construction, demolition, and facility restoration. Today's JBLM master plan replaces separate Fort Lewis and McChord Air Force Base plans. The JBLM plan creates a single vision that supports multi-service mission needs, plus the needs of JBLM service members, their family members, the civilian workforce, and military retirees. This effort began in January 2012 with a cross-section of Army and Air Force members, spouses, and students who met to revamp the master plan's overall vision. Later visioning sessions generated additional input from JBLM personnel. Service members ask,
why is it so hard to get around?
And why is everything so far apart?
JBLM is a big place, and its services are spread out over a large area. That's why JBLM's master plan showcases communities with walkable neighborhoods, identifiable town centers, and connecting streets. It shows how residents will easily reach JBLM's food, gas, shopping, medical facilities, and entertainment services. Also, housing and work areas are easily accessed either by walking, bicycling, or driving. Lewis North's town center exemplifies this approach. Its Exchange Mini Mall and gas station, dental clinic, gymnasium, dining facility, and Warrior Zone are in a centrally located area, surrounded by barracks, then headquarters, and finally motor pools. That makes the area walkable, sustainable, and identifiable. Base-wide, we've divided JBLM into 18 neighborhoods. Each neighborhood gets its own Area Development Plan, or ADP, that's based on a series of design principles. In 2007, ADPs were created for Lewis, Maine, and Lewis North. We've now updated the master plan to include 3 McChord Field ADPs, the McChord Center near the Exchange, the Flight Line, and the Carter Lake housing area. The ADPs guide each neighborhood's future development. Another ADP has been created covering the area between Lewis, Maine and McChord Field, called the Lewis-McChord Link. This ADP features a new road that will allow secure, unimpeded access between Lewis, Maine and McChord Field without passing through a security access point. The JBLM Master Plan drives future development by identifying what space is available for new construction. It also identifies what facilities can be repurposed. Using this, planners can review potential expansion areas, consider the facility's purpose, and then choose a suitable location. Additional growth, however, won't be so easy. Future development can't reduce range, training land, and airspace. Recognizing this, the JBLM Master Plan uses higher density facilities that use less real estate by building up, not out. The plan calls for building 3 to 5-story buildings on main streets, such as the new construction going on now along Pendleton Boulevard on Lewis, Maine. We're also using more mixed-use buildings approach. This will allow us to locate a shopette near a residential neighborhood or build workspace over retail shopping areas. This approach is an essential element to the master plan, since JBLM's population has nearly doubled since 2003. Finally, we're creating public spaces in the master plan, main streets anchored by a green area where people can gather during their off-duty hours. Our goal is to build every neighborhood around a center that is within walking distance. The first JBLM Joint Base Master Plan is complete. This living document, which is updated about every 5 years, will set the stage for a new and improved JBLM for the next 50 years. A JBLM almost unrecognizable to you and me.